Hello, assalamu alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the Azeeza show. Today, we are here to talk about some really resilient women. We're talking with some really resilient women about their stories and how they're making a contribution to society and to people and their lives. Last week we had a chance to speak to Asma Hussein, and as you can imagine, she had quite a remarkable story as well. So I'm excited to introduce our two guests here today, Jessica and Rhea. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. So I just want to just jump right into it. So can you tell me a little bit about, who you are, how you grew up, like what it is that, tell us about yourselves, and then we'll kind of get into some more.
You want to go first? I'll go first? Okay.
Okay.
So for me, I guess to paint a little bit of context in my journey and my story, it's this pattern of a lot of life transitions that came along with wanting to create a sense of belonging and community for myself. And so I'll take you back to 1987.
Okay.
I was born in the Philippines. I was 6 years old. We migrated to Canada with my parents at that time.
Right.
And my family really wanted to provide my brother and I a life that was beautiful and promising in Canada. We lived in a modest home in the Philippines, one bedroom, one space. And I recall I slept on the floor with my grandma on a straw mat. It was called a baneg, and that's typical in the Philippines. So although in the Western world it wasn't necessarily considered advantaged, it felt far from disadvantaged for me. It was a happy home. And so fast forward to when we came into Canada, my parents really wanted to provide for us our own family home. And so what came with that when we migrated was, I recall them working multiple jobs, and along with that required us to move often. And so as you can imagine, a 6-year-old going into elementary school, moving often, it was a challenge making friends. And so just when I would make friends with someone, we would have to get up and move. And so with that, they didn't have things like Facebook or Instagram, and so keeping in touch was a little bit of a challenge as well. Yes, there was writing letters, but that fizzled off, and yes, there was the telephone, but that only lasted for so long, and I came from a strict family, and so there was a limit to that. Anyway, long story short, what that translated into me growing up was this desire to always connect with people, and this desire to create a sense of belonging and create a sense of wanting to feel like I was valued. And so that equated to me later on getting into relationships and connecting with circles that weren't necessarily the most ideal situation for me. However, back then, and I recognize this now, I did that because of that desire to belong. And so my first relationship that I had as a teenager, an early relationship, was actually an abusive relationship. And recognizing that now, I recognize that that was meant to happen for me so that I can do the work that I'm doing today. Connecting with a circle of network of people that weren't necessarily, again, the best and most ideal for me and my well-being, which included a lot of partying, some heavy drugs and whatnot. Again, that's something that it wasn't so much the partying and the drugs I was gravitating towards, it was a sense of community that I wanted, and back then that was all I had. And unfortunately, I didn't have, positive influences in my life. And so those were the people that I looked to for influences in my life. Now, how that translated in my adult years in the corporate world, I looked to my so-called mentors as the ones in that environment. And in that environment, what I'm recognizing now that it wasn't really in alignment for my truth and who I was. It really suffocated a lot of my expression, a lot of my creativity. And so I became an individual that really was trying to pretend and live this life that I thought was the right life to live. And I thought I was supposed to live, and it was supposed to be what I was supposed to do to look and feel accomplished. However, there's only so much pretending that you can do, and after years of conditioning, that took a toll on my health. So I was diagnosed bipolar. At one point, was prescribed a concoction of pills, diabetic type 2. I was heavily overweight, and I was just in a space where my body, every cell and pore in my body was just telling me this is not the life for you. And so it took a shift back in 2013 for things to really wake me up and shake things up in my world. I got laid off from my job, walked away from a long-term relationship, my house, got in a car accident, lost my car. It was a reset. but it was exactly what I needed to get me to a place of presence and understanding that if I kept going the way I was going, that it would be ultimately detrimental to my overall well-being. And I knew deep down inside there was something in me that I just felt was calling for a greater purpose. However, I also knew, and the biggest call for me was, in order for me to be great for others, I needed to be great for myself first, and I needed to heal myself first. So what that translated to was really just diving deep into learning as much as I can about this whole body, mind, spirit approach, and really just healing myself. Went into school for holistic nutrition, and I didn't really do that for the sake of doing that work, but more so to heal me.
Yeah,
I immersed myself in personal development, worked with mentors, coaches, programs, seminars, and just really wanted to do the inner work so that I can do the work that I'm doing now. And you know, fast forward to today, that's why I'm sitting here with my business partner, Jess, this inspirational woman, that we're able to create and do the work that we're able to create now.
Exactly.
And really, it's ultimately based on the journey that I've been through.
Wonderful. Well, Jessica, you and I met years ago. We were trying to think of when. It's been quite a while, but I remember hearing you speak about your story, and that's what, at that time, it was like something that really struck a chord with me, and I tried to, we stayed connected over the years, and so I'm so happy that you're here, and both of you are. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah, I'm glad we stayed connected over the years. So actually I have some overlays with Rhea's story, but for me, I'm originally from Edmonton, Alberta, so total prairie girl, and I grew up in the 80s, so the Edmonton that you know now is very different from what it was back then in the 80s. You know, I remember being in elementary school, in a school of like 300 plus kids, and I can count on two hands how many Asian kids there were. And so I always felt like I stood out, right? And at a young age, you realize at some point you're different than other people. And, you know, I would hear the racial slurs and like, you know, the chinky thing and like you're, you know, whatever it may be. And so I was like, well, wait a second, like, and then I was also always known as the shy one and the cry baby in the corner, you know, and so I always felt pitted out over like my classmates. And as I got older, I felt like, you know, Rhea was talking about like that sense of belonging, and I can relate to that because I was trying to find that place. And as I got into junior high and high school, you know, I came from a very good home. So it wasn't like you'd expect, like, I'll get into my story a little bit, but you usually expect a broken home or anything like that. My parents were loving, they're still together, all that stuff. But I felt like my life was boring and I needed more excitement. And so for me, I was seeking, or what I sought was fun in the quote unquote wrong ways. And I was gravitated towards gangs, street gangs and that life and the criminal life. And that's what I got into and I was exposed to. And I was just talking to my husband the other day and I was like, wow, because he goes, how many years were you exposed to that lifestyle? And I said, like, actually, and then it came to 14. I was like, wow, 14 years. Sometimes he laughs at things that I say and he's like, that's totally something from your past. And so, yeah, so anyways, I fell in love with a guy who was involved in that lifestyle, and him and I got married, and we had a few kids together, and that was an abusive marriage for 10 years until he finally tried to kill me several years ago, right? And that's the story that you know and we connected on. And really that was a turning point for me. Like Rhea was talking about her reset. For me, that was a huge wake-up call, because I remember being on the sofa, laying there, and as he was choking me, one of the thoughts I had was, this isn't fair, I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do. And that was my catalyst, that very moment. And that I made a declaration to myself that I was not going to live the same as I did before. And there were still some things going back to, like, you know, I thought I would take him back, you know, the whole abuser relationship thing. And that only lasted like 4 or 5 months before I said, you know what, I put my foot down and said, I have 3 kids, you know, looking at me as a role model. I need to put my foot down. And, you know, I was thankful that I had really good mentors around me that said, Jess, you started something and you need to finish this. And so I left the relationship and started my next chapter of my life as a single mom, raising 3 kids, which was one of the hardest things that I've had to do. Is, you know, one of my biggest challenges. And through that, you know, again, personal development, same as Rhea, and just like figuring out, you know, what's going to make me happy. What do I want? Because for so long I was living life for somebody else.
Right.
And and that was the difference. I wasn't living for who Jessica was. Like I didn't know who I was. I was lost in the outside world. I was lost in this marriage and this relationship. And so, you know, the first thing that came to mind was to become a raw food chef. And I went down to New York City, and then I became a personal trainer, and then still something was missing. You know, I sat there and I was like, you know, if I was laying on my deathbed, what would I regret not doing? And one of the things that came to mind, the biggest thing, was traveling the world and sharing my message. And once I made that declaration, everything changed, and that's when Rhea and I aligned together and started doing this work.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's yeah, like I'm thinking, like I've been speaking these days as well about my own story, and you know, and just looking at the parallels in terms of what you've talked about, like growing up, you know, in difficult places, and you know, having to go through issues around poverty and food insecurity, and then me personally having to work at a very young age, multiple jobs, trying to help my family and all that stuff, and just basically losing myself in that process, right? And then having to, like, you know, at some point, like I went through, you know, a marriage as well, which was like immigration fraud, and that kind of really woke me up and was like, what am I doing with my life, right? Meanwhile, I was working with the, you know, in the anti-violence, you know, sort of movement, and I'm teaching other women how to, you know, try to find their voice and to heal. And so that was, you know, something that, like, for me was very life-changing, going through, like, you know, physical sort of transformations as well around, like, the weight loss and stuff like that. So it's really, you know, it's one of those things that's really important. I think that piece around the, you know, speaking, like finding your truth and your purpose, I think that's really, really exciting. Yeah. So you both now have this amazing organization, right, called Syndicate International Group.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what you do?
So our work is in leadership expansion.
Okay.
And so essentially what we do is we provide leadership development programs to leaders that have overcome adversity, called to create an impact in the world in developing communities.
Right.
And so at the moment, we are actually working personally one-on-one with 9 leaders in Kampala, Uganda, where we're literally on calls with them bi-weekly, where we go through delivering our leadership development program.
Right.
And the intention is to prepare and to support them in creating a powerful workshop in July, where we'll be meeting them in person there this July, which we're super excited about. And the intention is for them to execute that workshop, and with that, having the tools and resources available to them to be inspired to create further impact moving forward. And so initially how this whole started was Jess and I were going to do the workshop and facilitate it ourselves. But there was something about that was very clear to us. We didn't want to just parachute in and out of a place, create an impact, and leave and say, okay, great, we did it, let's move on. We wanted to create sustainable support for them. And so when we flipped our perspective and realized that, hey, let's support the leaders that are already there, that have the relationship with the community, support them, because you and I were so lucky to go to seminars and go to attend programs and have mentors and coaches that we have access to on a regular basis. And there are people out there that can benefit from that, but may not have that accessible to them. And so what Jess and I are doing is we're just taking our journey and our knowledge and we're just passing it down.
That's fantastic.
And so that's essentially what is the driving force and the fuel to the work that we're doing. It also became very evident to us that we are so committed to this that we want to ensure that we feel empowered enough to be able to execute those mission trips anytime, which is the reason why we chose not to register as a nonprofit and instead create a social enterprise.
That's actually something I want to pick up on. And we just have to take a quick break.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, great. Welcome back to the Azeeza Show. My name is Farheen Khan, and with me today are our guests Jessica and Rhea, and we're talking about Syndicate IG, or the International Group. So we were just talking about kind of the work that you've been doing. You've been traveling, you're meeting with people, you're running workshops, you're you're empowering other people to run workshops as well, which is quite remarkable. So can you tell us, like, what has been like give us an example of the kind of transformation that people have had in their lives since you've been doing this?
So you know what? So Rhea and I doing this work is actually pretty new, but before this, doing different kinds of coaching, it's for me, it's been quite diverse.
Okay.
But I would say that the overarching theme that I've seen with my clients, the biggest success, is really for them to get out of their own way.
Okay.
Because if they're able to get out of the small talk and the fear, the whatever, we all have it, right? If they can get out of their own way, then they can create what they're wanting to create. They can manifest what they want to manifest, you know, do whatever they want to do. So I would say that was the biggest thing. If I was to look back at all the clients that I've worked with, it's getting themselves out of the way to get the results that they want.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for myself, if I was to think back at the previous clients, it's really connecting people back to their truth.
Right.
You know, whatever your belief system is, whether it's source, God, universe, whatever it is, there's an inner wisdom within us. And oftentimes that inner wisdom gets so overshadowed by all the distractions in life. And that's what really causes all this chaos and confusion mentally in our mindset. And so for me, it's really getting people to that place so that it impacts their personal life, their business. However, what I'm really present to as well in the work that Jess and I are doing is with the leaders that we're working with in Kampala. You know, we get messages from them all the time that they're saying that they're so inspired to be doing the work and how grateful they are to have connected with us. You know, we have a WhatsApp group chat that we're constantly sharing, you know, how the week's going and things like that. One particular leader built this relationship or has created an improvement in a relationship with her and her father that she blamed for many years because of the fact that he's abusive. And she created a story that he was the bad guy, but has now come to this understanding of that he's just doing the best that he could and really connecting her back to love, which is essentially truth, right? And so, you know, I'm so proud of the work that Jess and I are doing and the impact that we have with this group already. And we're just so excited to continue creating this impact and the impact they're going to make moving forward in communities and beyond, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of those things I always, you know, think about, like how, you know, lucky people are who really know their truth and their purpose. It's so, you know, it's like some people can go throughout their whole lives and not realize what that is, right? Just sort of be in the day-to-day. But it's so nice to know that both of you have that, right? And that you've kind of come to that point where you're able to really spread that message of truth. And I mean, personally, I think the lived experience thing is like, you know, in hindsight, like when I wrote my books and stuff, I was like, okay, you know, like, it's almost like you're putting yourself on like this, you know, you're looking at yourself in this film, right? Like you can actually see all the scenes. I'm like, okay, that all makes sense now. This is why it all happened, right? And so sometimes it's difficult because then you're like, well, you know, why did this happen to me? So like, you know, and I know for me, it was like this whole like self-blame stuff, right? It was like, oh, maybe it was my fault and stuff like that. So, you know, how do you really do that? How do you change a person's mindset so that they like, you know, step out of their way, and how do they come to that realization that, you know, that that it's all about love? Like, how does that happen?
Oh, I think really, if we really just get present to the fact that we're all students and teachers, all at the same, right? We've gone through our journey because we're there to teach others the lessons that we've gone through. Right? And although Jess and I and you, we're all coaches, we're teaching other people, we're also students. So it's, if we really get present to that and like put ego aside, we recognize that, okay, the truth behind all of that is really just love. Right? Because we're all the same, regardless of the color of your skin, your culture, everything else. It's just that. Right? So
we're lifelong students.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're always learning. Amazing. So, okay, so here's a question. So there's people, you know, I'm sure everybody's going through challenges, everybody's going through difficult times in their own way, right? You know, and we don't know sometimes what the scale is, and we can't really compare ourselves to others because everybody's going through something. But what are some words of wisdom or advice that you would give to somebody that, you know, is currently going through a very difficult time?
So I would say to know and trust that whatever their experience is that they're going through is the perfect experience that they're meant to be going through right now. As hard as that may seem in the moment, as unbelievable as that may seem in the moment, it's actually, you know, we all go through challenges and adversities. All of us, it's part of the human experience. No matter how successful somebody is or how perfect their life might look like on social media, everybody has challenges. And so you can choose to look at it as, you know, by the way, there's no such thing as, you know, bad luck. Some people say, oh, I'm cursed with bad luck. It's like I'm always attracting all this dark stuff. But that's not the reality of it. You can choose to wallow in resentment and anger and fear and sadness, whatever it may be, and attract more of that energy, or really you have the power to set yourself free. And that means by looking at what you're going through as a learning opportunity, and seeing how you can grow from that, and seeing the positive learnings through that experience and move forward. Because if you can do that, then you can skyrocket out of whatever you're going through right now.
Yeah, and I would say everything that we are going through is preparing us for the person that we're meant to be. Right? So it's just whatever challenges it is, it's exactly echoing what Jess is saying, and just getting present to that it's happening for us, right? Because there's a greater plan behind this all.
Yeah.
And I would also add to that, you know, there's the light and dark that exists on this earth, and we need the dark. We need that contrast in order to grow. Like, how am I going to know I like vanilla ice cream if I've never tried, you know, other ones? If that's my absolute favorite, if I've never tried strawberry ice cream or whatever other flavors, right? So we need those experiences for us to grow in this lifetime, right? We came here for a reason.
Yes.
So light and dark, like sometimes people want to try to stay away from it, but it's there to serve a purpose.
Right. That's great. Very exciting. I'm really glad that we've had this, like, we've had a chance to talk about this stuff. I know that, you know, it's true. It's one of those things where it's so hard to, when you're in the moment with you know, going through a difficult time, it's so hard to see like the positive on there or the silver lining or whatever, right? It's always like, you know, and I know that we've had some guests over on the show as well, some who've, you know, are currently going through some difficult times, and some who've been able to sort of overcome those challenges. And I'm always curious to like kind of know, like, what is it that, you know, how do you sort of allow yourself to let go and sort of take that sort of leap of faith? Like, you know, can you guys maybe talk a little bit about that?
For me, what comes to me is just like the power of just surrendering sometimes is so much easier than resisting. And so just surrender to the process of what is happening. And it's not saying that to be submissive and not do anything. It's surrendering to what's happening and just really tuning in to the resources around you that can support you as well, that can uplift you, that perhaps may not be the typical resources that you have around you, and maybe it's just taking a closer look at who are the influences in your life that can help support you through that process, right?
And I would add to find it within yourself to forgive, most importantly yourself, but other people. Like, that's the most freeing thing. You know, people used to ask me, how did you forgive your husband who tried to kill you? You know, and you know, sometimes you hear stories on the news and they're like, yeah, but they should, you know, burn alive, or yeah, throw them in jail. But I don't believe that you can fight dark with dark, or fire with fire. You need that light, you need that love and compassion and forgiveness. And that's really where it starts to set yourself free.
No, and I mean, I know on Facebook, like, we're still connected. I remember recently seeing your wedding photos, and I was like, oh my God, this woman who told me like years ago that her husband tried to kill her is remarried. Like, that's huge. That's remarkable. So, you know, that, you know, really speaks to that idea that you just talked about forgiveness and letting go.
Totally.
Wow.
And attracting a different kind of energy, right? Like, you can choose to just like, this always happens to me, and just, I know a lot of people that go through domestic violence, you know, they cope with substance abuse, or, you know, some of them, they kill themselves, you know, whatever it may be. I'm saying that there's a large percentage of women and men that aren't able to get out of their situation. They when I say they choose not to, I'm putting it as if, because essentially at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. And that might be a hard pill to swallow for some people, because they want someone else to blame. But it's really like all the power's in your hand to change the trajectory of your life and the people and the events that show up in it.
Well, it's true. It's but it's very difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely very. But when you do it, and when you actually, I mean, in my experience, it's been the same. It's like, you know, I resist, and I'm like angry, and like overthinking everything. I'm trying to like make everything better, and then it all falls apart. But then, you know, I finally let go and just say, okay, God, this is in your hands, and everything starts to fall into place, right? Far beyond what I had ever expected, and more, you know, better than what I could have ever thought or planned, right? And everything works out the way it's supposed to. But in those moments, it's really difficult, because it's like, you know, we all go through that, right? It's very difficult to kind of really let go and just say, okay, this is far beyond who I am. And I think one of the things that even recently, like, you know, in a different context, like, you know, there's so much happening with respect to like Islamophobia and the way that Muslims are being, you know, portrayed in the media, and like we're all, you know, quote, activists who are trying to constantly push that narrative. But it comes to a point where it's so exhausting. And I remember, I know a lot of our, you know, over the last couple of months, I've seen a lot of our, you know, my colleagues who've started to really burn out, whether it be physically or emotionally. And, you know, I kind of had to take a step back for myself as well and say, you know what, I just, this is beyond me, right? Like, it's not just one person's burden to bear. It's something that we need to be able to let go and say, you know what, we're all doing the best that we can. But we also need to accept that there's a higher, you know, there's someone higher and greater than us that, you know, has a plan and purpose to what is happening, right? In many ways. So kind of feels like it's the same type of thing even in individual lives, right?
Yeah,
definitely.
When we lead with compassion, and we lead with more forgiveness, and we lead with more love, we're beginning to lead with less resistance.
Right.
And when we know that we don't have to constantly push and resist, and we just allow, it really just creates this sense of inner peace. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And choosing love, you know, it can be challenging, but if you can even say to yourself, like, I choose love, you know, and just keep pouring on the love, just keep pouring on the love. You know, it might sound crazy, but it's the times where I just don't want to give something up. I'm just like, okay, just love, just love, just love. And it works.
Yeah. And actually, to add to that too, it's like going back to whatever your belief system is, you know, if you replace that term or that whatever the belief system is that you have in your mind to love, and ask yourself, what would love do?
Right. Okay.
And really just get present to that.
Right.
Whether it's you about to get into an argument with someone, you getting frustrated, overthinking something, what would love do?
Right.
And likely it's the opposite of what you're wanting to and conditioned to want to do.
Right, exactly. Right. So, in terms of the, I just wanted to ask you the conditioning piece, right? So, around the conditioning, I've often heard people say the word unlearn. Is that like, is that how you would describe that in terms of the conditioning?
Definitely for me, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, like I shared, my journey was this journey of influence of not the most ideal situation, and trying to be someone that I wasn't, and believing that that's the way I was supposed to be, but really what I was doing is suffocating my truth. When that shift happened for me, I did have to unlearn.
Right.
I had to reprogram my mind and literally release everything that I thought I knew.
Right.
And just instead get quiet and listen to the voice inside, because we have that inner wisdom that speaks truth.
Right.
That's beyond the books, beyond everything else. Right. We have all the wisdom within us. And if we honor that quiet time and listen to that, it's surprising, but we're bound to eventually connect to that voice and that truth.
And that's the space where people find their purpose, because it's within you.
Right.
And a lot of people, you know, it's the day-to-day busyness of their lives, the 9 to 5, the kids, the whatever it may be, and they never have that chance to have that quiet time.
Right. Right.
So.
No, that makes sense. I mean, for me, I think that like that quiet time for me is like when I'm praying, right? Like, and you know, I'm a woman of faith, so we're praying multiple times in a day. It's just like that connection is so important. I think that's where I'm able to kind of, you know, not just sort of think through, but also kind of just feel that sense of inner peace that's so important to keep going. Yeah. So how do you do that for yourselves?
Me, I have quiet time in the morning. So sometimes it's meditation, but you know, I have this playlist, and you know, whether it's, I don't even know how to describe this music, but sometimes like they're binaural beats that I'll listen to at nighttime, or just to help reprogram my mind, or just music that's helping me to calm, and I like to get up before the kids get up. That doesn't always happen, but if I can, that's the best, because the house is completely quiet. and I'll burn some sage or some Palo Santo stuff. I have crystals and then I'll start reading. So that's really my grounding time. Before I look at any work, before I talk to anybody, that's my time.
Very cool.
Yeah, similar with me as well. It's just the AM practice, right? And that was really my savior. When I came from that life where things shifted, is I needed to get quiet. And so, you know, connecting with nature and just disconnecting before I even log on to social media in the morning is just getting that time to be able to get into a practice of myself. And so for me, it's meditating, stretching, yoga, a little bit of reading, journaling, before logging on to social media, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you both.
Thank you.
I'm really so grateful that you both came and shared your words of wisdom with us.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll have you on the show again sometime.
Would love that.
All right, thank you. Okay, so this is Farheen Khan signing off for today. Thank you so much for listening. This is, you know, if we can leave with anything today, it's just to really think about, you know, what it means to find inner peace and what you can do to make your life better and the life of those around you better, and to really think about our purpose in life. Thanks so much. Take care.